our Sunday program today, September 20th. We were just sharing earlier in our last class that it's been over 6 months since we've all been at home because of COVID, but these 6 months have also given us an opportunity to hopefully go deeper in our spiritual life and continue to pray for so many people whose lives have been completely upended by this disease. But it's an opportunity for us we're so fortunate that we're still able to connect with each other in this virtual platform. And we're very grateful to all of you for taking your time out and joining us today. Today, we're very honored to have a very special Sunday feast. And our Sunday feast is going to feature a renowned speaker, Her Grace Radha Dasi. Radha Dasi will be speaking on the topic of finding inner peace by service to Krishna. This is a question that a lot of people keep asking, like, how do you find peace? Particularly in a time like today. I was talking to someone at work recently, and they were sharing that, there seems to be this influx of time that you didn't have before. And now people are questioning, like, I have all this time. I thought it was lack of time that was not making me peaceful, but I have this time and I'm still not peaceful. So it's a question that people have been asking for decades and millennia. Like, how do you find peace? So today she'll share with us how by connecting to Krishna, we can find inner peace and especially everlasting peace. Radha Dasi is a graduate of the Harvard Law School and practices law in the US with an emphasis on helping victims of domestic abuse. She's a trained peer counselor for domestic abuse issues and previously taught at Chapman University School of Law and the University of San Diego School of Law. We're very, very excited and honored that she's joining us today to help us find more inner peace. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for that kind introduction and for having me. It's very inspiring to me. I didn't even know you all had a temple, had a congregation there, and that's fantastic. It's really nice. We're such a big ISKCON family. So yeah, inner peace. It's like a unicorn, like we know it exists, but we don't often see it, right? Srila Prabhupada told us, this world is full of anxiety, right? We're aiming for Vaikuntha, the place where there is no anxiety. And we're in the place that's the opposite of that. So definitely there's a lot of anxiety here. And even on a material level, people are aware of this. It's one of the most common mental illnesses is anxiety disorder. I think 18% of the country has some form of anxiety disorder. And in this COVID situation, even more people are struggling. I think 53% of Americans have said that their mental health is worse because of the pandemic, because of all the changes and austerities it's imposed on us. I know when I learned how to do book distribution from Vaisheshika Prabhu, right? The hook that he suggests that we use is to ask people about stress. Do you have a secret? How do you handle stress? And because so many people, are interested in that and resonate with that because there's so much stress. And it is a problem that goes back. If you look at the earliest psychological studies, which happened in the 1800s, same problems, stress. They talked about the stress of modern life back then. So, how do we understand this? How do we deal with it? What's the Vaishnav response? So we understand this world is a dangerous place, that this stress is not something we're just imagining. Okay, it's not just because I'm tired or whatever. This world really is a stressful place because there's danger at every step. Padam, padam, yabi, padam, right? So in order to become stressful, we got to change something, right? But to do that, it helps to understand why the material world is this way, right? My daughter, when she was in elementary school, was really frustrated with Krishna, right? Because she wanted to surrender to him, but she couldn't. She's like all of us, material desires kept coming up. And she's like, why doesn't Krishna just make me surrender? He can do anything. Why doesn't he just take these desires away, right? And Krishna doesn't do that because he wants us to make a choice. Really, this is the only freedom we have, right? Is the freedom to choose Krishna or to turn away from Krishna. But because we are created in order to have loving exchanges with the Lord, you know, that's the purpose for which we exist, to serve him in love. And love implies a reciprocation. He needs us, wants us to freely choose him, to choose love. So the material world, because it is a place where we can have that choice to turn away from Krishna, is essentially has to be full of anxiety. There's no other choice, because this is the place where we forget who Krishna really is and what our relationship to him is. Okay, and in that context, it's like if you start with 2 + 2 = 5, you're never going to get the right answer in your calculations. And so similarly, when you start with the idea that I want to enjoy separately from Krishna, there's no way you're going to end up happy. Krishna tells us this. He said, material solutions to these age-old problems are not the answer. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya Lameva Ye Pravatite Mayam Tarantite. This divine energy of mine, which consists of the 3 modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond. So I have spent a lot of time in my life trying to arrange my material circumstances so that I could become happy, right? If only I had more time, right? Especially when the kids were young, that was my constant lament. If only I had more time. If only my children were better behaved. If only my husband was, more attentive. If only I had a different job. If only I lived in a different city. And, and so we create even more stress for ourselves because we're busy running around trying to change things, and we never become peaceful, right? So as long as I'm hooked into the idea that some material arrangement is going to give me peace, I'm doomed to not have peace, right? We have to look for a spiritual solution. My husband had a conversation once with Janani Vas, who's one of the twin pujaris in Mayapur. And Yudhishthira, my husband, was talking about how there are some material desires that are harder than others to let go of. And Janani Vas's response was, as soon as you think about enjoying materially, you have to suffer. Like it's just cause and effect. And it doesn't matter if the desire is strong, small, or large, or, that you're only asking for a little bit, there's going to be some suffering. And obviously, some activities cause more suffering than others, but there's going to be suffering. Another thing that we need to understand about being peaceful and being free from anxiety, that's not actually our goal. That is not actually the point of becoming Krishna conscious. That's a side effect, right? So what is the goal? The goal is to learn to love God. And this is important because Krishna is not sentimental. He gives us what's best for us. But he gives us what's best for us that will help us become Krishna conscious. He's not saying, I'm going to give you what's best for making you peaceful, right? So we can never, if our peacefulness is dependent on material circumstances, we will never be peaceful. We have to learn to be peaceful even when the material circumstances are unfavorable, right? In one of his books, C.S. Lewis, who's a Christian writer, it's called The Screwtape Letters, and it's a series of letters between 2 demons who are trying to take a man's soul. And the senior demon tells the junior demon, if you can get your patient, that's what they call the soul, the patient to the point where his good nature depends on some material thing, no matter what it is, then you have him, right? If you can make it so that he can't practice his Christianity unless he has certain material circumstances, then you've won. He's going to be trapped forever. And that's really true. Whenever we are in a situation where our peacefulness depends on other people doing things, we are doomed to disappointment. You know, we can't control other people. We can't control the environment. We can't control even our own minds, most of us. Okay. Carrie Ten Boom is another Christian personality that I think says something to this point very well. She was a Christian, I can't remember if she was a nun or just, you know, very devout Christian, but during World War II, she worked against the Nazis trying to protect Jews. And she was arrested and put in a concentration camp. And she made so many converts while she was in that camp because she was so peaceful. She was so God conscious, even in the worst of material circumstances. And she said, you will never know that Christ is all you need until Christ is all you have, right? So we can cultivate that mood, that Krishna is all we need, you know, and we can ask Krishna to help us understand that he's all we need, okay? And there have been devotees in our own movement who have had similar experiences. The Russian devotees who's, you know, the initial pioneers who started Krishna conscious movement in Russia, they were also imprisoned and abused and beaten and, you know, had their children taken away. They were forcibly given drugs that made them hallucinate and, you know, really starved. They were starved a lot, really, really a lot of austerity. And they also were able to manifest this peacefulness and happiness in this terrible situation because they were depending on Krishna, right? And it doesn't mean that they didn't suffer, they did, right? But there was something higher than that suffering. And it was also attractive to others. Even the prison guards sometimes became interested in Krishna consciousness just by seeing how fixed these devotees were, even though they were suffering awful abuse. So we have to cultivate detachment, right? And Krishna says in Gita, Matra sparshas tukanteya shitoshna sukadukada gama paino nityas tam stitik shasva parata. Okay, so just like the summer and winter seasons appear and disappear in due course, happiness and distress come. And the wise man has to learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Okay, so what exactly does that mean? Because I spent a lot of years trying to get to a point where I did not feel discouraged. I did not feel unhappy. I did not feel angry, right? And I never got there, okay? And I had to re-examine that verse because the verse doesn't mean we're not going to feel these things. We will. It means that we don't let those feelings drive us, okay? Part of understanding that I am not this body means understanding that I am not my emotions either. And my emotions are in no way a reflection of absolute reality. And that's something that I've really struggled with as a devotee. I think women in general, we tend to express our emotions more and pay more attention to our emotions, take our emotions more seriously. It seems like I feel sorry for American men quite often because it seems like the only emotion they're allowed to express is anger, you know, and anything else is considered unmanly. Okay, but we all get discouraged, man or woman. We all get discouraged. We all feel sad. We all have these hard times. And it's not that the practice of Krishna consciousness is going to make the hard times go away or even the uncomfortable emotions go away. Those emotions have a purpose, right? When we feel pain on the physical level, it's a sign to us that something's wrong. We need to fix something, you know, take your hand out of the fire, whatever. So those emotions also have that message for us, you know, something's wrong. Maybe I'm pushing too hard, pushing myself too hard. Maybe the situation, you know, like this pandemic situation is a huge wake-up call to the whole world. Let's put everyone in distress and get everyone thinking about what am I doing wrong here, right? But that's what those emotions are for. What they're not for is defining myself by them or basing my relationships with other people on them. When I gave birth to my daughter, I experienced really terrible postpartum depression, right? And that was such a blessing because it really brought home to me how I am not my emotions. Because intellectually, I could understand I am not sad. I mean, I just had a baby, blissful with this child, family's doing well, jobs, everything's going right. So why am I so unhappy, right? And it turns out it's because of something physical that was happening in my body, right? So when I take those emotions as ultimate reality, it's just the same kind of illusion that makes me think, I am this body. I am an American. I am, the wife of this person. I'm not. I'm Krishna's servant, and I'm not a depressed person, and I'm not an angry person. I'm Krishna's servant who, in the material world, interacting with the material energy, may be feeling those emotions at this time, right? So understanding how all of this fits together, how the material energy works, what's serious, what's not, what to do with the information that we get from our emotions and our relations with others and the circumstances in the world, that's leading us to the point where we can cultivate inner peace. I think a good example of this can be found in the pastime of Gajendra, the elephant, right? So here's somebody who has great material facility. He's the strongest, animal around. He's the king of the elephants. So he's got a whole kingdom, a whole population of elephants that are giving him honor and obeying him. He's got a great wife, nice children, and they're living in a place where the demigods actually go when they want to enjoy. So you can imagine how opulent this is. And yet he gets into material difficulty, right? So there's no place without material difficulty. He's in the water and he's attacked by a crocodile. And the crocodile, has been said by Vaishnava commentators to represent time. So that no matter how good our situation is, time will defeat us if nothing else does. Now, I said Gajendra is the strongest animal around. So how is he having so much difficulty with the crocodile? Because he's in the water, and that's the crocodile's element. So the crocodile is strong in that element, and despite his great strength, Gajendra is being defeated. All of his material resources cannot help him in this struggle against the crocodile of time that's going to eat up all our attachments. And ultimately, he's pushed to the point where he has no choice but to ask Krishna, Vishnu, for help, right? So he has to pray, and he prays, and he offers a flower, right? And then Krishna reciprocates, right? So what we can see is we're not going to be able to defeat the material energy. We're not going to be able to avoid all problems and troubles. So we need to turn to Krishna. And we need to chant, we need to speak, right? Pray, chant, but we also need to offer something. We need to offer some active service. So if we can live in that way, we begin the process of becoming free of anxiety. Now, this process of becoming free of material anxiety, you can look at it from a number of ways. In one sense, I said it's a side effect of becoming God conscious. So to the extent we are developing our spiritual strength and becoming, more God conscious, naturally, without external effort, we are going to be less disturbed by things that happen in the material world. But it's also worth cultivating. Because for most of us, for myself anyway, my transition into becoming a pure devotee is going to be a very slow process. It has been slow so far. So there are things that I can do to work on developing the qualities that I hope to attain in full through the process of God consciousness. And Krishna gives us the peace formula in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Prabhupada called it the peace formula. Bhoktaram yatapasam sarvalakha maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatvam mam shantim richati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material energy. Okay, so in one sense, it's very simple, this formula. You just have to realize these three things. You know, Krishna is the beneficiary of all sacrifices. He is the Lord and controller of everything. And he wants us, you know, he wants the best for us. He's our well-wisher. But it's not an intellectual understanding that's required, right? It's an active, apply in my life kind of understanding that's required. And that's something that takes cultivation. One of the tools that I find very effective is to kind of, they call it seeing through the eyes of Shastra. In other words, trying to see my life through the lens of some spiritual principle. Lawyers, we always have what we call a theory of the case, right? We want the judge to understand that this is really a case about, you know, a big corporation trampling on the rights of individuals and, you know, really hurting these poor, defenseless, you know, mothers or something. And the other side may say, no, 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 that's not what this case is about at all. Right? It's about an organization that has a responsibility to do things a certain way and is not responsible for the consequences, whatever. Okay. So two different lenses, right? And you can see things in two different ways. So we need to pick the proper lens to see the world through, right? And personally, I find this Suridam Sarvabhutanam line is my lens that I hold on to, that Krishna is the benefactor and well-wishing friend of every living entity, right? Because events as they happen in the material world are actually neutral, right? What they have meaning for us because of the lens we see them through. And what I mean by that is we all have stories that we tell ourselves about what's happening to us. I'm 9 years older than my younger brother. And so I always, you know, I'm a big sister, plus I'm a lot older than he is. And the story that I was living by was I am the kind, generous older sister who's always making the effort to assure that my younger brother is doing the right thing, right? And the lens he's seeing it through is that bossy, controlling sister of mine. When will she, you know, leave me alone, right? Same events, two different understandings, right? So we can choose how we want to understand what's happening to us. And I choose to understand that everything that's happening to me is Krishna's arrangement for my benefit, right? So whenever, I shouldn't say whenever, a lot of times, you know, I'm not able to do this, but the goal is to look at every difficulty and ask myself, okay, what is the lesson that Krishna wants me to learn here? What, you know, is this an opportunity for me to practice tolerance? Is this an opportunity to learn, you know, something more about myself, to see another anartha that I have to work on? You know, what is going on here? There's a, you know, an old saying that an optimist is someone who, if you give him a barn full of manure, he'll be happy because he thinks there's got to be a horse in there somewhere, right? So, you know, I try to cultivate that kind of optimism, that no matter how bad or difficult the situation seems, somewhere in there, Krishna's got something that's good for me, right? And that does help with anxiety, because a lot of my anxiety comes from the misconception that I'm supposed to control my material circumstances so that I'm happy. I mean, that's what modern society, that's what material society tells us. You know, if you become rich enough, smart enough, thin enough, you know, popular enough, whatever, you will become happy. So if you're not happy, it must be because you're controlling the material energy in the wrong way. Well, that just adds to my stress when I'm unhappy. Not only am I unhappy, but it's my own, you know, my own lack, right? But if I understand that, yeah, happiness and distress come and go in the material world, but I'm blessed because Krishna is reciprocating personally with me, giving me the unhappiness that is going to help me learn to love him, right? Sometimes, I think especially for those of us who grew up in a Judeo-Christian environment, sometimes there's this feeling that when bad things happen to us, it's because Krishna doesn't love us, right? That we're not qualified to be happy because we're not surrendered to Krishna. And that's not true. Krishna loves us just the way we are, right? He's not punishing us in the sense of you did something wrong, so I have to make sure that you suffer. You know, he's giving us what we need to move forward because he loves us and he wants us to remember how to love him. That's what this whole life is about, just trying to learn to remember how to love Krishna. You know, that love is there. It never went away, but we have to learn how to participate in it again. All right, so part of my journey, and I just want to say something. You know, I talk about myself a lot when I give class because I feel like that's what I have to offer. I don't have deep spiritual realization, right? I have life experience. I have 30 plus years of practicing Krishna consciousness. So that's what I have to share. And I hope that, you know, some of my struggles and mistakes, you know, have some value for other people who might experience similar things. So one of my struggles is this trying to move the knowledge, Krishna conscious knowledge, from the head to the heart. You know, like nothing that Srila Prabhupada told us is too complicated to understand, at least on an intellectual level. But understanding it on a heart level is different. So what I'm trying to say is we have to become active learners in Krishna consciousness. You know, a lot of times in my life, my study of Krishna consciousness has been on the platform of reading Srila Prabhupada's books and hearing from Srila Prabhupada's disciples, both of which are essential principles, essential practices, and need to be done daily, right? But if I stop there, I'm not getting the full benefit of these, you know, these resources, right? Because what I have to do is take the principles that I'm hearing in the books and in the lectures and actively apply them in my life, right? If I don't do that, I'm kind of like the guy who has $1 million lottery ticket but never bothers to cash it in. You know, it's like I have something really, really valuable in my hand, but unless I use it, I'm not going to get the benefit of that value, right? So seeing through the eyes of Shastra, that takes it down to the level of everyday activity. It's not, you know, Krishna consciousness is not something that just happens at the temple, that just happens when I'm chanting japa, that just happens when I have Srila Prabhupada's book in my hand. It happens all the time, every day. That's what we're aiming for. So the more I think in terms of what scriptural principle is being exemplified by the difficulty I'm facing, you know, who in the Bhagavatam had to face a similar situation. And when I think in those terms, it brings Krishna consciousness down to something really practical. And also it's a lot easier to keep my mind in a Krishna, you know, focused on Krishna, because I'm looking at everyday activities, right? I'm looking at something that's fundamental to my life and trying to see it as material for helping me become more Krishna conscious. All right, so that's one principle, is, you know, see through the eyes of Shastra and become an active learner in the sense of applying spiritual principles in our everyday activities. The other thing that I think is really important for peace, for getting rid of stress, is letting go of expectation, right? Expectation is said to be the enemy of happiness, right? When I expect things to turn out a particular way, basically what I'm doing is assuming that I have some control, right? Expectation and the desire to control and the activity of trying to control, they all go together, right? Krishna tells us in Gita, karmanya vadikaraste ma paleshu kadachaya ma karma pala hetuabur mate sango svakarmani, okay? You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So what Krishna is telling us is, yeah, don't have expectations. You're not entitled to the fruits of your activities, right? And also, we're not judged by the fruits of our activities either, right? That's a big one. A lot of times when I'm doing a service, I have an idea in my head of how it's supposed to turn out, right? I'm in one group and we're working on a problem, and in my head, we're going to successfully overcome this problem. We're going to go back to the senior devotees and tell them, look at how well we solved this problem, or maybe pats on the back, and it's going to be great, right? That's not how it's turning out. The group cannot work together. We're struggling. We're not making any forward progress, right? And it may be, the lesson here may be that this is not the service for me, or we need to do something differently, or different group. That may be the lesson. I don't know yet. But it's certainly not turning out the way I expected. And when I sit with this idea that it should turn out the way I expected, then I find myself finding fault with devotees, right? They're causing this thing to turn out wrong, right? And even if that's true on a material level, it's not true on a spiritual level, right? Krishna is the controller, not us little jivas who are trying to work on this problem with our little talents, right? So when I understand, hey, somehow Krishna is creating a lesson for us and for the other devotees who are affected by this. I don't know what that lesson is. I don't know why it's taking so long to teach it, but I can accept that, okay, I've done my best. I've made my endeavor with good intention to do this service the way that I understand from my seniors that it should be done. It's not happening. It's okay. Doesn't mean we stop trying, doesn't mean we don't look for other solutions, but I don't have to feel guilty or responsible or try to, browbeat other devotees into changing their behavior or their understanding. That is really important to becoming peaceful, right? Because I don't know, maybe keep a journal for a week and see how many of your expectations are fulfilled. Because my guess is you're going to find that a whole lot of them are not, right? So it's not bad to have an expectation, but we don't have to be so attached to it that we become disturbed if our expectation is not met. Which isn't to say that we won't be disturbed sometimes. We can't help it. But you get the idea. Another kind of related point is I usually don't have all the information about any circumstance, even when I'm living through, right? I don't know everything. Krishna knows everything, right? So a lot of times I will have a judgment about a devotee or about about something. And I think that the way I'm seeing it is reality, okay? And this comes up for me, particularly when I think devotees are not treating each other well, or not behaving like a devotee, right? I can get very judgmental. And in the past, I've really harmed my own spiritual life by making judgments about senior devotees based on something that they did, and what they did was legitimately not proper Vaishnava etiquette, right? But judging the devotee is not my job, right? So just a simple example, there's a devotee called Prabhupada Das who is from the US and now lives in Mayapur. And when he first met the devotees back in the early 70s, he was a young teenager, right? He had had a very, very hard and abusive life up to that point, right? And so he was a very angry, rebellious, destructive young man. When he saw the devotees the first time on Harinam, his first impulse was to attack them, and he'd throw rocks at them, he'd curse at them. Every time he saw them out on Harinam, he would do this, right? So he looks like a demon, right? terrible person, attacking the devotees. He should be killed, right? You know, one of the devotees eventually decided, okay, I got to do something about this. And this was a, very strong Kshatriya type of devotee. And he gave Prabhupada Das the sauce. And he said to him, "You're just a punk," right? So he's giving him some information, some correction, right? And again, my motherly nature is, oh, no, that's not how you correct people. That's mean. You can't be mean to people, right? We should have understood his trauma. We should have, shown him love and affection and won his heart over, right? But that's not always true either. And in fact, Prabhupada Das will tell you it was that line, "You're just a punk," that stayed with him, right? And what he needed, that masculine aggressive energy, in order to hear what was being said, and ultimately it caused him to become favorable to the devotees, right? So at any step, something's happening that I don't fully understand. So for me to try to control things and make judgments doesn't make any sense, right? There have been so many times in my life where I've prayed for something, I haven't gotten it, and a little while later I'm saying, "Thank you so much, Krishna, for doing it your way instead of my way, because your way is so much better." So that too we can use to cultivate inner peace, right? The knowledge that no matter what we're going through, it's helping us move to the goal of fully loving Krishna. That's a very powerful reassurance, And when we don't think in terms of scripture, when we don't think in terms of our relationship with Krishna, it's very easy to go through these difficult situations feeling like we're falling farther away. Life is spiraling down, right? And no matter what our material circumstances are, if we are holding on to Srila Prabhupada and his devotees, our lives are not spiraling down. They're spiraling up. We're making advancement. Gratitude. Gratitude is the antidote for expectation, for unmet expectations, right? Radhanath Swami famously says repeatedly that we have to become grateful for everything. And he means that literally, everything. If I stub my toe, I'm supposed to be grateful, right? And when I first heard him say that, I thought, okay, well, Maharaj, you're a pure devotee. That's easy enough for you to say. But how am I supposed to be grateful for these terrible things that are happening? And one of those was my mother got cancer, and she was in her early 60s. So, much younger than you would expect somebody to be leaving you. And she's, anyway, anybody who's gone through that experience of having a parent have cancer, it's very hard, and at the time, my brother and my father, their way of handling it was to get mad, right? And because they couldn't yell at my mom, and there's only 4 people in our family, I got all that anger. I'm trying to take care of my mom and I'm getting attacked by my family, and it's just like, I don't see Krishna's hand here, right? But the culmination of all of this, like 3 years of anxiety, is my mother left her body on Janmashtami night. My brother, who's really inimical to Krishna consciousness, I don't know, he just got up and walked out of the room right before she left. I still don't know why. And so I was able to turn on Prabhupada chanting. I held her hand and chanted in her ear, and she left, and it was like, okay, Krishna, I get it now. This whole experience has been the most amazing blessing. I'm like tearing up right now just thinking about, how much Krishna loves us, that he makes these arrangements. And my mother never actively practiced Krishna consciousness, but she did favors for devotees. She did things for devotees because they were friends of mine, and so Krishna's reciprocating with her in this beautiful way. And at the same time telling me, you know what, I got this, it's okay. It may look like a big mess, but trust me, and so that's how I need to go through life, knowing that I don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, Krishna, but I'm grateful because I know that whatever you're doing is going to take me to the point where, I become more Krishna conscious, which is the goal. All right. Last point is that while we don't want material anxiety, we do want spiritual anxiety, right? Just as the gopis are very, very anxious to serve Krishna. That's the kind of anxiety we want to cultivate. And for me in my life, what that means is extending myself for Krishna, putting myself into uncomfortable situations for Krishna. Years ago, when I first met Malati Prabhu and traveled with her a little bit, she would just throw me in, like we went up to Middlebury College in Vermont and, 300 people had shown up to hear her talk about the 1960s or whatever. And she just turns to me and says, you should lead kirtan, right? I'm not prepared. We have no mic. We have, no instruments, I'm clapping my hands in front of 300 people. I am not a great singer, and it's like, okay, I'll do this. I'm the kind of person, like, I like to give lectures. When I was a kid, I used to give lectures to my dolls, I have no problem talking to 1,000 people, right? But I am very uncomfortable talking to people one-on-one. I don't know what to say, I know how to lecture. I'm not so good at, reciprocating. But my husband is excellent at it, and he does a lot of congregational preaching, or he did before he became ill. Just lots of congregational preaching. And so he was constantly putting me in situations where I would have to talk to strangers, right? And, but I learned to do it, right? And that's been his approach to Krishna consciousness all through our marriage is, okay, this service is going well. Now, how can I stretch myself one more step? What can I add? And I used to get so frustrated with him. All right, Prabhu, we're having 2 programs a week at our house. That's like all we can do. We can't do anything more. And he's like, no, we can have a 3rd program this week at someone else's house. And I was like, no, we can't do that. It's too hard. We're overextended. And he'd say, give it a try. I give it a try. And it would work, And if it didn't, then we'd retrench. But, that's the anxiety we want to cultivate. Can I do more for Krishna? What more can I do for Krishna? While paying attention to things like, am I burning myself out? And am I burning my family out? And am I taking care of my responsibilities, right? In that context. But understand that as we learn to let go of expectations and the desire to control in the material world, our anxiety there is going to be reduced. And that frees up a whole lot of emotional energy to put into our practice of Krishna consciousness, to put into serving Srila Prabhupada and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu where it needs to be. So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully there are some questions, comments.
Thank you so much for that absolutely wonderful class. Devotees, if you have any questions, if you'd either like to post it in the chat, or if you want to raise hands on Zoom so we can call you out to ask the question, please go ahead and do that. So you can either put the questions in the chat or raise hand on Zoom by clicking on the reactions on your Zoom button, on your Zoom toolbar, and then we can get going. As we're getting for questions to start, I had one question. I love the point that you just shared about cultivating spiritual anxiety for Krishna, and particularly not knowing to cross the threshold. One of my personal struggles with cultivating spiritual anxiety is I don't know, am I actually being anxious for Krishna, or am I just being anxious for myself? So how do we know the difference between, like, is it like cultivating a spiritual anxiety? Is it like spiritual anxiety, or is it self-driven anxiety? And just to give an example, if we're having it's COVID, it doesn't exist, but assuming there's a home program and devotees are coming to our house and I'm making like lasagna. Now, there's obviously anxiety because we can't taste it, we're offering to Krishna before devotees come. And I feel a lot of anxiety, but then I wonder, am I anxious because I want to serve devotees properly? Or am I anxious that if this dish is bad, they will think less of me? So I wanted to get some advice from you on that.
At least for me, my anxiety is, made up of both of those, right? I do have that, material desire for profit, adoration, and distinction. And, and at the same time, I do want to please the devotees. Radha Swami said once that when we offer something to Krishna, but we're proud, that we're making this offering, it's like sprinkling sand on the boga before you offer the plate. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever given Krishna an offering that didn't have some sand sprinkled in it. Yeah, but I think this also brings up an important point, is that part of Krishna consciousness is introspection. We really have to understand our own motives, because if we don't know that we have this pride mixed in, if we don't know that we have this hankering for material adoration mixed in, it's much harder to get rid of it, right? So we do need to know when it's there.
Thank you so much. Vaikuntesha Balaji Prabhu, I see your hand raised. You can give a question.
Very nice, enlightening talk. Thank you so much. I have a question. In your line of work, and you mentioned something about not be judgmental, but you go through that every day in your line of work. You have to judge. And how do you deal with non-devotee clients? Yeah, I don't think you have many devotee clients, but mostly non-devotee clients. So how do you deal with this kind of thing and do you choose your clientele based on, initial talks, Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
That is a struggle for most lawyers, is, how far down the ethical road are you willing to go for a client? But there's a difference between judging and assessing, right? Absolutely, we have to assess, is this person honest? Is this person kind? Not just, as a lawyer, but generally speaking. That is a struggle for most. Yeah, it is. So we need to have that information, but that information is neutral, right? She has black hair, she wears glasses, she's a little proud. Those three facts really have the same weight, right? Because all of it's temporary and illusory, right? So the judgment comes in where I start thinking, I'm a better person, or that person doesn't deserve Krishna's mercy, right? Everybody does. And part of, it's a game I play with myself. Every person I interact with, how much Krishna consciousness can I give them? Sometimes all I can give them is the thought that, there's a higher plan. Sometimes we just have to accept things because there's a higher plan. You can't even talk about God with some people, right? Sometimes we can talk about how the Lord has his own, time frame, and this isn't, the situation is not fair. I recognize that it's unfair. I recognize that you're suffering, but God has a plan for you, give him prasadam, right? So it's not even that what I'm giving these people is so significant, right? Because a lot of times it's very, very little, right? But that activity of looking at every person as someone I can give Krishna consciousness to, that helps me keep on an even keel, and yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Do those clients whom you tell that there is a bigger plan, God has a bigger plan for, do they tend to accept that? Or
if
some
they
of
don't,
them, yeah.
If some of them don't, if they don't, okay, I just won't bring it up again. I have a client who thinks that I'm a fundamentalist Christian because, when we talk, we're relating so well that, we both believe in the same things, and I don't have the heart to tell her that I'm a Hare Krishna devotee because I think she would think I was a demon then.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
The class was really very wonderful, and I need to learn so many things actually from the class. So I have a question, like being a parent, many a times we put the things on our kids, which we think it is good for them to learn. And the kids might think that it is a bossy think that our parents are just putting, so many restrictions on us and putting so many things on us. So I don't know how to balance this situation, like where he don't feel that I'm pushing too much on him and like I'm bossing around, and I don't feel at the same time that okay, he's on the right path. Like I have to balance that.
I think being a parent is the hardest service there is, and they say that stress is caused by situations where you're in control, but you're responsible for the outcome, which is kind of the definition of parenting. We feel responsible for the outcome, but our kids have their own plans. And I have to say that I really let my son down by not being a particularly good parent, by having an idea of how he was supposed to turn out and trying to put him in that box. And his sister is 6.5 years younger. So she had a much better childhood than he did. And what can I do? All we can do is the best we can. Communication, being adaptable. And this is something that Radha Swami always emphasizes. And he's my Shiksha guru, so I'm always quoting him. But he's also the person that I have taken my troubles to in parenting. So anyway, what he says is give them the taste for consciousness. If they get a taste for Krishna consciousness, the rest will come. And I really see that in my daughter, that I troubled her much less with the rules and the formal practice of Krishna consciousness, and she's the one who is more inspired.